In this exercise, you will get to practice using the DOM to create a colorful, changing pattern on the screen. You will also learn about a meta attribute to automatically refresh the page. You'll learn a little about CSS positioning. You'll be exposed to changing more CSS styles from JavaScript. And you'll learn about using the unload event as well. Here's a preview of what your exercise will look like when it's finished. This pattern is made up of multiple overlapping div elements whose size, position, and color have been set to create this effect. The entire web page refreshes every second, and all the divs change color every time. Let's start with the HTML. The code for this is provided for you in the exercise page, but I invite you to type along with me. First, open your course folder in VS Code. Then create a new HTML file named dom-patterns.html. As always, we'll start with the doc type declaration, then HTML lang equals en. Then in the head, we'll set the meta charset to UTF-8. Then after this, we'll do something new. Go ahead and create another meta element and give this the attribute of http-equiv, value of refresh, then another attribute named content with the value of 1. What this will do is cause the web page to refresh itself automatically every 1 second. Let's now set a title for this page. Then a style element, and we'll set an internal style for the div element. So this style will apply to all divs in this document. We'll use a CSS property called position and set it to absolute. What this will do is let us set the positioning of any divs on the page exactly where we want it, to the pixel, which is what we want in this exercise because we want to have divs that overlap each other, which they normally would not do. That's it for the head. Let's go to the body. In the body start tag, we're going to use what's called an unload event handler. We'll use it to call a function named showPattern. Until now, we've been calling our JavaScript functions from either onClick event handlers or from the JavaScript directly. This is yet another way to call a JavaScript function from HTML. When you use this unload event handler on the body element, that means that it will wait until the body and all of its child elements have finished loading. Then it will run whatever function you gave it. So you won't need to click a button or do anything else. This will automatically call the showPattern function as soon as the body has finished loading. Then, in the body, let's use an external JavaScript file this time. To do that, create a script element, and we'll point its source to the JS folder, then a file named dom-patterns.js. That's it for the HTML file. Now go to your JS folder and create a file named dom-patterns.js. In this file, declare a function named showPattern with an empty parameter list. Inside it, we'll create a colors array, which I'll fill with these colors, but you're welcome to use whatever colors you prefer, as long as they are valid CSS colors. Then we'll declare 4 variables using let. These are going to act as the initial starting values for 4 CSS properties that we'll set in a moment. So we have top position and left position at 25, and width and height at 500. Next, we're going to set up a while loop. We want this while loop to iterate as long as width is bigger than 50. So at this point, width is 500, so this condition is initially true, which means we will always enter the while loop. That also tells us that somewhere in the while loop, we need to make sure that width will eventually become less than or equal to 50. Otherwise, we would have an infinite loop. You always want to think about that when creating a while loop, how to make sure it doesn't become an infinite loop. Inside the while loop, we're going to write some code that should feel familiar to you by now. We're going to set a const variable named randomColorIDX. Then we're going to set it to a random index in the colorsR array by using math.floor and math.random multiplied by the length of the colors array. I have 7 colors in my array, indexed from 0 to 6. At this point, my randomColorIDX variable should hold a number between 0 and 6. We'll create one more new variable, a const named newDiv. In this variable, we're going to hold a reference to a node in the DOM that we'll create by saying document.createElement div. We're going to set some style properties on this new div. We'll set its style.topProperty to the number stored in top position, plus the string px, because a unit is required by the CSS property. We'll set style.left to left position plus px, then style.width to width plus px, then style.height to height plus px. Then the new div's style.background to the color in the colorsR array at the position of randomColorIDX. So at this point, we've created a div. We've made it into a square that's 500 by 500 pixels. And we've given it a position on the page where we want it to hang out, 25 pixels down from the top and 25 pixels over from the left. However, we still haven't attached it to the DOM, so it's not going to show up on the page yet. We'll attach it now as the child of the body element. We can do that by saying document.body.appendChild new div. This creates the very first square on the page, which is going to be the largest square. Next, we're going to set top position to plus equals 10. That adds 10 to the current value of top position. So it started out at 25. Now it's going to be 35. That means it will be 35 pixels down from the top. Then left position to plus equals 10. So we're going to be moving our div to the right by 10 pixels. Then we'll say width minus equals 20. So this will decrement the width variable by 20. Which is good because, again, we need to make sure that width will eventually be less than or equal to 50. It started at 500, now we're subtracting 20 from it, so eventually, after it goes through this loop enough times, it will be sure to become less than or equal to 50, and the while loop will be able to exit. We'll subtract 20 from the height as well, to keep it a square. That's the end of the code for the while loop. When this loop repeats the second time, it will select the new random color index, and it will create a new div element. That new div element will be given these new values that were set at the end of the last loop iteration for the top and left positions, and the width and height will be smaller as well. So it will end up creating a new square on the page that's smaller than the first one, so it will look like it's nested inside it. Then when the while loop iterates again, it will create another smaller square, and then another smaller square, and so on, until the width is no longer bigger than 50, then it will stop. And all of this happens really, really fast. So fast that every time the page refreshes once a second, it has generated, let's see, I think 23 different divs, almost instantaneously, so that you have a completely different set of randomly colored squares every time the page refreshes. At this point, this is what your HTML page should look like in your browser. There is an additional challenge for you in the page for this exercise. The challenge will ask you to update the code so that it shows circles instead of squares. View the instructions for details. Aside from that challenge, there's a lot that you could play around with here. I invite you to try changing around different things in the JavaScript and see what changes in the web page. Just be mindful about not accidentally creating an infinite while loop. What happens if you change the width condition to less than or equal to 300, or less than or equal to 10? Think about why. What happens if you stop changing the top and left position? Think about why. Play around with it and see what more you can learn from doing so.